Hello, my name is Julian Arato, and I'm a professor of law at the University of Michigan and a member of the AJIL Board of Editors. For this bookmark video, I've picked Hans Kelson's 1945 AJIL article, The Old and New League, The Covenant and the Dumbarton Oaks Proposals. Published in response to the first draft of the UN Charter, the Dumbarton Oaks Proposals of 1944, Kelson critically examines the structure of the proposed organization that would become the United Nations, by comparison to the constitutional strengths and weaknesses of the League of Nations. His goal in writing this piece was not only to analyze the emergent institution as a dispassionate observer, but to guide its design at the moment of its founding. Now, Kelson was most famous as one of the greatest legal philosophers to have ever lived. Born in Austria, he fled to the United States in 1940, and by 1945 was established as a full professor of political science at UC Berkeley. He had long been a keen observer of international law and institutions, and he was particularly interested in the failure of the League of Nations, a failure that was, in his view, not merely political, but also legal and institutional. The Old and New League was published in AJIL at a moment of total change. The work is comparative to the core, comparing the key institutional features of the new Dumbarton Oaks proposals to the relevant institutional choices of the Old League. And it is as much a study of constitutions as it is a work of international law. He's as interested in legal and juridical questions as he is in political questions of constitutional design. In other words, he's as interested in what the proposed constitution of the new league says as in whom it empowers to decide what it means. Now, Kelson is here interested in the most salient political questions of the day: how international legal institutions can be designed to establish a lasting peace between sovereign states. What makes the Old and New League remarkable as a piece is how far Kelson homed in on the key problems, the piece that could have been written as a reflection of the Charter in the 1990s or the late 2000s. It focuses in on all of the problems that you would be familiar with after taking a basic course on the United Nations or international organizations. He's interested in all of the problems as constitutional questions that we still debate today. First, he focuses on how the proposals entail a delegation of powers to its various organs. He fixates on how far the system is removed from the status quo ante of sovereign equality by delegating decisional authority to non-plenary bodies like the Security Council. Second, Kelson also focuses on how delegated powers are separated between the organs of the UN organization. He concludes with concern that all powers of significance are delegated to the smaller Security Council, in which 5 members would be permanent, especially the powers of peace and security, but also how even the UN General Assembly's most important powers would require Security Council approval or a referral, at least under this early draft. Third, Kelson focuses on the question of checks and balances between the separated powers, between the organs constituted by the system, at least in so many words. Finding no real checks on the Council from other organs, he examines closely the Council's internal composition and its internal procedures in the hopes of finding some check on its powers. He was particularly perturbed by the possibility of the veto. For him, the veto was a problem because it would allow each of the great powers, the P5, to sit as judges in their own case. He laments how, unlike in the League, the proposals allow the P5 to vote and veto resolutions to disputes to which they were a party, disputes which he perceived to be the most dangerous disputes of all. Now, of course, he understood the political need to let the great powers protect their interests, but he thought alternatives less offensive to the rule of law were possible. For example, weighted voting, or a partial collective veto that you would need 3 of the 5 P5 on board to pass a resolution. Fourth, and finally, Kelson was always preoccupied with the related issue of the compulsory judicial settlement of disputes and the locus of interpretive authority within the organization. Kelson long considered one of the League's great failings the absence of a compulsory judicial organ, a court with authority to legally resolve disputes and to decide interpretive questions. Kelson sees the same problems arising here in the context of the proposed new League, an ICJ with limited jurisdiction based on consent in contentious cases, and whose advisory jurisdiction could, at least under the proposals, only be triggered by the UN Security Council. As Kelsen put it, the result is that the International Court of Justice is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations in name only. For him, the real principal judicial organ of the United Nations, he writes, is the Security Council itself. It alone has the final authority to resolve legal disputes and to interpret the rules, even the rules of the Charter. What a failure, then, that the resolution of legal disputes and interpretive matters would be left to a body in which 5 great powers can block any decision adverse to their interests. In his view, this judicial power is simply delegated to the wrong organ. And indeed, he argues that only a court properly constituted would have the legitimate neutral authority and would be capable of acting with the required speed to resolve the legal aspects of disputes over international peace and security. Reading this piece today, Kelsen's trenchant critique is as important as ever. Certainly some things have changed in the direction you would have hoped. Something's changed between the draft and the final charter. For example, the General Assembly can request advisory opinions of the court and often does. And something's changed with practice. Indeed, even recently, the ICJ has proven itself capable of responding to the legal aspects of emergencies of international peace and security through its provisional measures jurisprudence. But at least in this reader's lasting impression, many of Kelsen's concerns were fully vindicated. Indeed, his analysis of the Council's interpretive authority seems almost prophetic in view of that brief period after the Cold War in the 1990s and early 2000s when the Council was most operative. Merely consider the Council's legislative resolutions making international terrorism law, like 1373, and its self-constitution as a quasi-court of terrorism with Resolution 1267. At the end of the day, this work is a classic in the understanding of and hope in and belief in our central international organization, the United Nations. And it remains a testament to the importance of comparative constitutional analysis, even in the study of international law and organizations. I trust you'll find a reread or a first read as enriching as I did.